And we are live. What's up, Scott Big Richard Riley?
How's it going, Tony? This podcast has been a
good.
long time in the making, right?
Yeah, last time I was here was back in January, and it was just a bunch of stuff going on. You actually got sick, so it was a little tough to record then.
Yeah, that was a pretty tough time, to be honest.
Yeah.
Probably been interesting, like with you being here in January while I was having like a dip in the roller coaster, and now coming back later in the summer and things are going a lot better. So
yeah, lots changed since then. And before we actually get in deeper, I just want to let everybody know that I purposely didn't eat and drink any water, so I'm gonna be really hangry.
Does that mean I have to cover the horny part?
Yeah, I think so, buddy.
Okay. I don't know if we'll get into that today, but that box is ticked.
Oh yeah, you definitely been luckier.
Anyway,
so yeah, buddy, let's go into like your journey, man. You've had quite a journey the last few years. You certainly had, well, first of all, we're in Bangor, Ireland, Northern Ireland.
Northern
Ireland. And so let's get into like what happened when you were like depressed, overweight, and you had suffered from rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah, that was pretty rough time. Probably like 2014 was the rock bottom point, summer of 2014. So yeah, just over 4 years ago now.
Okay.
And 7 stone overweight, which is like 45 kilograms for those crazy Europeans and their metric system.
Yeah, so 45 kilograms overweight?
Yeah. So
wow, so that's like 90 plus pounds.
Yeah, it's like almost 100 pounds, which was pretty crazy.
Really?
And so I was really overweight. Like you mentioned, I had rheumatoid arthritis, but at that stage, it had gotten really, really bad. I was struggling to get up and down the flight of stairs to the apartment where we are right now.
Right. And how old are you at that time?
So I was 26 at the time.
Very young.
Very young to have a condition like that, especially because most people associate arthritis as like some kind of old person condition. But the type of arthritis that I had is an autoimmune disorder, so that can affect like even kids or people at any age. It's more a case with the other kind of arthritis, osteoarthritis, that affects older people because it's just like wear and tear on the joints. Whereas the kind of arthritis I had is your immune system goes hyperactive and starts attacking your own body. So it's in a family of conditions, autoimmune disorders, so rheumatoid arthritis. Somebody, if they have an autoimmune disorder, it might manifest as like Crohn's disease, so that's like inflammation in the gut. Other people might have like psoriasis if it's a skin disorder, but it's all back to this root cause of your immune system going haywire. And for me, it was rheumatoid arthritis, so crazy swelling in the joints. Like I said, up and down a flight of stairs would have been sore for my knees. Opening a door handle or brushing my teeth would have hurt my joints in my hands. And
so did they know what the cause is? Like, does medical science understand like what's causing this type of condition in people?
Not really, but it's well-reasoned speculation that it's stress-related. And it's probably no surprise that in this day and age that autoimmune disorders are like, it's so hot right now. It's so popular, right?
Yeah, right. It's like trendy.
yeah, exactly. So,
but not stopping. It's like skyrocketing.
Yeah.
More and more people are, starting to have symptoms of these type of conditions, that autoimmune conditions.
Yeah, and so it's kind of not a surprise that it's like stress related because we're born into a world that we're not really evolved to deal with, and people are in low level stress all of the time. And part of my journey since that like rock bottom point that we touched on there has been learning a lot about health from different angles, and I've really started to get a better understanding of the nervous system through things like the Wim Hof Method and what our buddy Casper was teaching through Strong Fit. And to see that I was basically locked in that fight or flight state in the low level stress all of the time, and through that developed a pretty weak nervous system and the ability and vagus nerve or vagal tone, and my ability to go back into that rest and digest state was
so just for the audience, like what is the vagus nerve and what's the importance of that in the body?
So within the nervous system, there's the two well recognized states. And even though, like, our buddy Casper's working on, looking into that
Casper
even deeper.
Vandermoylen, everybody. He's going to be on episode 18. This is episode 19.
Yeah, exactly. So at the minute, the standard model shows, the sympathetic nervous system, or fight or flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest. And most people are basically stuck in the sympathetic nervous system all of the time, low level stress, because we're really not evolved to deal with things like traffic, bills, emails, constant screen time, just like bombarding our system and putting us in a state of low level stress.
Being hangry and horny.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's basically like too much of the good stuff.
Right.
Because stress has become a kind of dirty word nowadays, but like stress is a really good thing. I think the problem is the fact that we're just always in stress, and even if it is low level, and that's where I believe like these autoimmune disorders are so common nowadays, that I know for sure, like, so I touched on that rock bottom point in June 2014, but like that's the bottom of a journey that was maybe, I don't know, like over a decade of low level stress, so at some point my body just, that low level stress and the inflammation that's symptomatic of being in the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, just like locked into place.
Right. So it was like a super saturation point. It was the straw that broke your back, basically.
I believe so, and again, it's just all like highly reasoned speculation, but everything that I've been learning over the last 4 years since getting my health back, losing all of the weight, 4 years, no symptoms, no pharmaceutical drugs, seems to be that the more I align myself with how the body is evolved to cope naturally, so with a balanced nervous system, the better I feel, and I believe that many other people would benefit from that. So
medical science says that once you have an autoimmune condition, it's like almost incurable. Like essentially you're kind of stuck with that for life, and you've basically shown otherwise.
Yeah, so they also call it like a chronic illness, which means that you just don't get better, apparently. And
you were on a bunch of pharmaceutical medication.
Crazy pharmaceutical drugs, ones that are used as like anti-cancer treatment, and other like medication that was so strong that I was going for a blood test every 2 weeks just for the medication that I was on, like not even to do with the condition that I was suffering from. So yeah, needless to say, I really wanted off the pharmaceutical drugs, because I mean, I was pretty scared, to be honest. If like I'm having to go for a blood test every couple of weeks just for that drug, like what is that doing to my system? And worse still, it wasn't having any positive effect at that time anyway. So.
Right. And so, I mean, are you anti-pharmaceutical, or?
I definitely think they have their place for some people. The problem, I believe, is there's nothing like a drug isn't good or bad. It's maybe sometimes the motive or intent behind that, I think. And with the pharmaceutical industry, it's kind of set up that there's no money to cure people, but there's a lot of money to cure symptoms and get people taking the same drugs over and over again.
Right. So I mean, for people that are suffering, it has its role.
Yeah.
But there's also another option, right, with choice and lifestyle and nutrition and better sleep. And so let's get into like how you were able to wean off of these pharmaceuticals. In your specific case, you're not necessarily recommending that for anybody else, but for education purposes and information purposes, like what was it that you did that enabled you to like get better?
Well, I really appreciate you saying like we're going to touch on my story, but being mindful that this isn't like a path for everyone. And my path was pretty extreme. And why? Probably since I've gone on to learn more practical, sustainable things beyond that. But I'm definitely excited to share my story, because in order for me to get better, it was really important to hear other people's stories about how they got better. And there was other extreme stories that I heard. But it was a big source of inspiration, and then I came to learn that just telling my story could be a source of inspiration for someone else to do the same. So yeah, I took some pretty big leaps, and it got to that rock bottom point where, if I'm 100% honest, it was because it's a chronic illness but not terminal. Like, I was looking maybe another 40, 50 years maybe of being like massively overweight and in so much pain every day. And then understandably, probably mental health is just terrible. Like, I allowed myself to get completely isolated as well. Then I would go to the shop at like 11 p.m. when I knew no one was around, because I was quite ashamed of my appearance, and I just couldn't face another 40 to 50 years like that. I had to give myself, I had to know within myself that I tried everything possible, and then even if I was still sick, at least I could live with the fact that, like, I've tried everything. And that led me to the internet. You know, we're lucky enough to live in an age where the information age, where it's possible to look into other alternative health practices and take your health into your own hands if the standard Western medical system has failed you. And it works well for some people, but it unfortunately or fortunately didn't for me.
Right, it depends on how you look at it.
Totally. And so yeah, I took to the internet and
Dr. Google.
Found Dr. Google.
Yes.
And he recommended a few things to me. The first two things that I came up with were the plant medicine treatments in South America, so ayahuasca and huachuma. And the other thing that I discovered online that people had got a lot of benefit from, that suffered from autoimmune disorders, was juice fasting. So I booked the trip to South America.
So first of all, like, how did you even know what ayahuasca or huachuma was? Like, did you like type in rheumatoid arthritis, how to heal this, and that's what came up, or you actually heard about plant medicines from another source?
I'd heard about them I don't know, maybe like 6 months or so in the past. Like, I'd started getting into things like the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, a lot of different podcasts, to be honest. And one of them that really spoke out to me was Aubrey Marcus's podcast whenever he was on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Okay.
And he talked a lot about huachuma and ayahuasca, and it always stuck in the back of my head as something that was fascinating. And even though when he was talking about it, it wasn't really specifically related to health, like physical health issues, but maybe more like mental health issues like depression, anxiety, PTSD, addiction. But there's a huge correlation between depression and anxiety and autoimmune disorders. So something had stuck in the back of my head related to that, and I'm not sure whether it was something that I'd seen maybe like following MAPS, they are doing a lot of investigation into how psychedelics or entheogenic medicine can really impact the body in different ways. But I was aware of it before I came to think of it as something that might be able to help with my health condition.
Okay, so now you're actually booking a trip to South America.
Yeah, so last desperate act, basically. Last roll of the dice here, because feeling like feeling pretty hopeless, to be honest, right up until before this point, because 2 years before I've even got to this stage, there was one pharmaceutical drug that did work for me for about 6 months. And that was kind of awesome at the time. I got sick, and then it took them a long time to find a pharmaceutical drug, but eventually there was one that worked pretty well. And then whenever I got my health back then, I took up cycling. I did the Maracycle, which is like Belfast to Dublin, 112 miles or something cycle, raised money for arthritis research, everything going really well, and then it stopped working. So
really, just like that?
Yeah, I think my body just
adapted.
Pretty much. So
down-regulated.
And I think it was like even harder to take than whenever I got diagnosed as unwell in the first place. So
because you had like a glimpse of hope, and then it was taken away from you.
Yeah, and then I think that caused me to think like, well, if they ever find another pharmaceutical drug again, then it's just going to stop working as well, and I might only ever have like these 6-month windows for the rest of my life, if even. So that forced me into looking into alternative measures as well, but it also caused me to, before that, become quite hopeless, really, thinking like, It's, I'm never going to get my health back altogether. So yeah, I booked that trip as a last desperate act, more or less. And then one of the best things that just booking that trip gave me was, it was like a motivation to start doing other positive things for myself, because I knew that, like, I booked the trip in June 2014, but I wasn't able to go until January 2015. There was a specific place at the retreat center in Peru, and they were doing a particular kind of ceremony and retreat there in the January. So they only take like 20 people at a time as well. So it's also hard to get in there. So I had this 6 month time period of booking the trip, and before I was actually going. And that gave me like a motivation just to do anything and everything I could to help myself before I was actually flying there, to give myself the best chance of that actually working for me. So
Right. And usually, as far as I remember and know from my own personal experience going to these type of places, is that they prepare you before with like a nutritional type of thing where you like cut out a little bit of salt and you cut out a little bit of meat, and prepare your body for these type of plant medicine experiences.
totally, they call it a dieta, where they advise you to, cut out certain, the retreat center I went to, things like pork and salt and certain spices. I've since come to learn that different places have different traditions of giving things up, and I personally believe that it's maybe just more about like the sacrifice of giving something up, and also the idea of like maybe not putting so much processed stuff into your body. And even at that time though, it really did get into my head, and some of the stuff that I'd searched online from like forums about the plant medicines was that the more clean your body is when you go there, the better chance you have of it working for you. And then also the less rough of a ride you might have, because a symptom of the plant medicine experience, particularly ayahuasca, is what they call purging. So throwing up, if you're lucky, might come from the other end if you're unlucky.
Yeah, or both at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Fortunately, because I went there like super clean, so in that 6 month time period, I like went it straight into this whole juice fast protocol that I discovered through different documentaries. We can definitely talk about that too, but yeah, that was really important for me in that 6 months, to clean my body as much as possible to go there. And yeah, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but that paid off big time. Like I didn't purge physically so much. Like I maybe threw up a couple of times in a lot of different ceremonies. I probably had an easier ride physically than a lot of the other people that were attending. But yeah, maybe that's jumping a bit far ahead. Maybe it would be good to touch on the juice fast in particular.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of documentaries that you had watched. So you certainly did your research on Dr. Google and looked at all these different options and found a couple of movies that touched upon juice fasting.
Yeah, so there's one, I think it's on Netflix at the moment, actually, for anyone listening to this who wants to watch it. But it was called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. And it sounds kind of grim, but it is really positive documentary. It's by an Australian guy called Joe Cross. And he was in a really similar situation to me. He had an autoimmune disorder as well, like a skin disorder though. So in the same family, but symptoms were showing differently. He was very overweight and highly stressed. And to put it in a nutshell, he went 60 days on a juice fast, a couple of months solid, and basically was off his medication by the end of it, and lost loads of weight and all the things that I was inspired to do as well. So that was a massive inspiration for me. And then, as fate would have it, like, it's funny how these things pop up at the right time, but another documentary was just being released as I watched that first documentary, and the second one was called Super Juice Me, and it came with a 28-day plan. So I figured, I'm going to take the best of both documentaries, take that 28-day plan, put it back to back plus a few days to bring it up to 60, just because I liked that idea from the first one, and went for it. It was really, really, really tough for a couple of weeks. My diet up until that point was terrible. Like, I was just eating junk food all the time, and like comfort food, because I just felt my mental health
That
was
was like the only pleasure you had in life.
as kind of pathetic as that sounds. It's true, like it's kind of, it's even to even put it like that, it really hits it home for me.
Right. So that's starting to make me empathetic of people that do eat for comfort
Yeah.
and, and end up being overweight. And it's like the only thing in their life. I don't know, for all the years I'm thinking about this, like it just finally hit me right now, like
Yeah.
why we eat for comfort. But if that's like the only thing that you have to give you pleasure in life, like that totally gives me a different frame of mind when I see people that are overweight or obese.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's a conscious thing necessarily. I don't even think like maybe a very overweight person like myself would think about it in that way. But like whenever you analyze it, it's very true. At least whenever I look back on it, in my circumstance, it probably was like one of the few pleasures, even though it is a very, very short term pleasure of, good chemicals released in the brain when you eat that sugar or saturated fat or that was one of the few things that was good about life at that time, even though it's not very good.
Right, which we talked about the pharmaceutical industry, and now we touched on the food industry and how they actually design food to be addictive. So now you're munching on all kinds of delicious things that don't really have much nutrients.
Totally. And
And that's addictive.
yeah, totally. So, and sometimes I struggle, and maybe it doesn't matter that much really what the truth of it is, but I don't think that there's like this like little dark room where like five rich old white guys sit around and go, we'll make this food super addictive and we'll make these drugs to make them better for it. And maybe there is, I don't know.
Yeah, the whole conspiracy theory of like the five richest families that control like the bank system and the government and the food and the pharmaceuticals, and they get together every year in their little dark room and plot this out to basically keep humans slaves to all these things.
And I can 100% see why, like, it's very easy to put those pieces together. I don't know if it's as simple as that, and again, maybe it is, but I could also see, and it feels more believable or realistic to me, that like, there's a company and it wants to make money, and it sees that, oh, we can make this food delicious, and they maybe aren't thinking of it in terms of like we can make it addictive,
Yeah.
though that's the truth of it.
Right, and advertising and marketing is designed to like trigger us to think about those things. And when you're hangry and horny and you're going shopping at the supermarket, it's like you're gonna go for the things that are shiny and look delicious and make crunchy sounds and salty, fatty. And I mean, we understand that like fat is not the culprit. Like we understand like that eating more fat's actually really good for us, but then everybody's different, right? So let's get back to your case with the juicing. What did you notice when you started juicing? Like you said, the first couple of weeks were really hard.
For sure, and like my body was definitely in withdrawal from things like sugar and salts, and that was really tough. I also made the decision to end my course of pharmaceutical drugs at that time, so that's where things definitely get into the realm of like I can't prescribe that same action for anyone else.
Yeah, that was the choice
rest.
you made. Yeah, you don't recommend anybody do that, because normally the recommendation is to go talk to your doctor and have them give you a course of action to wean yourself off of these drugs. You went cold turkey.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So I stopped the drugs and stopped all of the rubbish food and basically drank fruit and vegetable juices for 2 months. Those first 2 weeks going through that withdrawal were awful, but another really positive thing I did for myself in that time was getting as much movement as I could in each day. So whether that was like 10 minutes walk the first day and coming back and being in a lot of pain because of it, but it was still just something positive I could do for myself. And very quickly, maybe even after 2 or 3 weeks, that was like 30 minutes. And after a month, I was like going for a walk for an hour every day around the block. And after 6 weeks, like, it was the first time I got back on my bike for the first time again, which was just unbelievable. Like, something I never thought I would do 6 weeks prior to that. So
Yeah, so you're basically progressing over time, your activity level, and not going balls to the wall right after the get-go,
yeah.
and then over time started to build up your strength, your endurance, and actually starting to notice some of your symptoms disappearing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, the symptoms were really falling away as the time passed, and I was able to do more of this stuff without really hurting myself. And yeah, it continued on for beyond the end of the juice fast. I just continued to eat as cleanly as possible for the remaining 4 months before the trip to Peru. So
When you were on the juice fast, were you only doing juices, or did you have other types of foods?
only juices, so only fruit and vegetable juices
Wow, really?
for 2 months. Yeah, but honestly, like, it was hard for 2 weeks, but beyond that, you just kind of get used to anything. I think if you get like systematized and just like get into the habit of it, it really wasn't as hard as I believe most people think it to be. If you can get past that like couple of weeks and build those habits, and yeah, it was kind of okay, to be
Yeah.
honest.
So, I mean, a lot of people would quit. What made you be able to persevere those first 2 weeks?
Oh, there was definitely moments where, like, I would have to go in the times where I would go to the store, and it was during the day. The fruit and vegetable section was right beside like the hot deli, and I'd like smell this roasted chicken and be like so close a bunch of times, and thinking like, oh, it's not gonna hurt me, just one bit of chicken. But then I always had this thought, like, I have to give myself zero excuses for why this doesn't work. If this doesn't work for me, I don't want to have any excuse. I have to stick to this as strictly as possible. So if I get to the end of 60 days and I still have all my conditions, at least I can look back and say, well, I gave it absolutely everything. And so that was a huge motivation for me. Like, the condition I had was so bad that I didn't want to give myself any excuses why what I was trying to do to help myself didn't work, if that ended up being the case. So that was one thing. The trip to South America was another huge reason for my dedication to it, really. I had this huge thing coming up on the horizon, and I knew I just had to stick to it. This was like
So
all or
you've had
nothing.
like 2 months into this, and you still had another 4 months before your Peru trip.
Yeah, yeah. Although, saying that, by like this stage in that like final 4 months, like, things were looking a lot more positive. I was being able to get back on my bike again, and feeling good, and the time was ticking closer to going to Peru, and I felt really good about that and really positive. So yeah, I just continued to eat as cleanly as possible, and I didn't really know necessarily what I was doing, so I was just eating as simply as possible, like chicken, fish, steamed vegetables, salad. Like, that was kind of it for about 4 months. But then after 2 months of eating no solid food, like, that's pretty awesome. So even
Absolutely.
that simple diet.
Yeah, simple diet, but it was just still delicious, right? Because at this point, you really started to appreciate food. You started
Yeah.
to notice your own like mental makeup in regards to food, and certain ideas of like moving towards a goal that you had. So you really gave it a shot by running. If you were to look at it as like a science experiment, you're like, these are like the parameters that you're laying out,
Mhm.
and I can't go outside the parameters because I'm actually trying to see if this juice fast actually works.
That's a really good way to think about it. Yeah, like, I didn't want to ruin the like control, like,
Hmm.
by putting other things into the experiment. So yeah, I continued to eat really cleanly, and also then by this stage, the weight loss thing was a big motivation, because I dropped a lot of weight in those 2 months, and I was continuing to lose weight, and I wanted to get back down to like a normal looking, healthy person, and so that was a big motivator. Like, the good momentum was carrying me forward, and that's like, that's definitely one of the biggest takeaways from this whole experience. Like, the good momentum that I was getting myself into really carried me out and onto all the cool stuff I'm doing today. But also the opposite's true, to the point where I was 7 stone overweight and really unwell. Like, that was just all bad momentum, like, I was eating more because I felt bad, like eating worse food, and more because I felt bad, and that would make the condition worse, which would make me feel more bad, and I would eat worse food and get more overweight, and then the rest would become harder. But then the opposite was true. Like the more I was losing weight and the more exercise I was doing, I could see like this is really good. I'm just gonna keep on rolling with it. And
Right. So they're basically these like feedback loops that are reinforcing whether positive or negative. So either way, there's like a momentum that happens when you do either one and
Yeah.
you start to see results. How did you deal with like your environment, with your peers, like people who were around you, like friends and family, as you were partaking on this new journey? Like, how did you deal with like, maybe naysayers or even your own thoughts that were limiting?
Truthfully, because of those years where I'd really allowed myself to get very, very isolated, I didn't really have very many people around myself. Like, I
Wow.
maybe had a couple of friends that I'd stayed in touch with, and mostly just like via message. I would still see my parents maybe like once a week, or once or twice every couple of weeks, but yeah, there really wasn't much feedback because there wasn't many people
Yeah,
around
and
me.
like you said, you would go to the supermarket at 11 p.m. at night so that
Yeah,
you wouldn't run into anybody or anybody would see you.
pretty much. And then from the few people that were, still in touch with me in my small social circle, then they could see the results, like, I mean, they saw like I was so overweight and so unwell, my skin was gray, my eyes were dark, and then like, they could see that I was losing weight and I was doing better and feeling more positive. And you can't really argue with results, like whenever they see I'm doing better, even though I'm sure my parents were worried about me like going into the juice fast and worried about me going to Peru. They It was hard to argue with the results, and it was motivating me to do something really good. So yeah, the feedback was always positive. And then I don't really know why whenever I look back on it, and whether it was just intuition or not, but I really had total faith in what I was doing the whole time. Like I never like I was never questioning myself. I always felt like this thing going to Peru is exactly the right thing. This juice fast is exactly the right thing. And that might be as much part of like everything that I did, my like faith and belief. And honestly, I'm not 100% sure where that came from, but there's definitely a part of it that was hearing anecdotal evidence and other people's stories, and probably why it's so important for me today to be doing the likes of this podcast and sharing my story, because there might be some person on the other part of the world that like, damn, if that big fat sick guy can do it, then hell, maybe I can as well. And not do the same things necessarily, but might just start taking good actions for themselves.
Yeah, that's what's pretty fascinating about other people that have gone before us who've gotten the results. I talk about the 4-minute mile effect, with the Roger Bannister effect, of the first person ever to break the 4-minute mile mark. And so once he did it, which they thought was humanly impossible, then like within like a month or a couple of months, like other people broke the record as well. So I think that there's so much power to being like someone in your community that actually gets the results, and then actually makes you the expert, because like you said, the results don't lie, and they speak for themselves. So now let's fast forward to Peru.
Yeah, the biggest part of the journey, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's by the time I was going to Peru, I'd lost like 90% of all of that weight, which was
Wow.
crazy, like in basically 5 months. Lost the rest of it like in the time in Peru, basically. And yeah, I was suffering no symptoms at that time anymore of the condition or anything. I was going out there feeling completely fine. And
So at this point, you're pretty much symptom free, lost
yeah,
all the weight,
no pharmaceutical
no
drugs.
pharmaceuticals. And what made you decide to not cancel the trip if you're like, oh, I don't really need to go there to help heal this condition?
I still like paid, I think it was there was certainly a deposit that was non-refundable, but that, that wasn't the reason that I didn't go. I still intuitively knew that this was going to be really good for me. And even like I think there was something in my head, and I'm just remembering this from like the first plant medicine ceremony that we went into. It was like I wanted to cement what had gone on in my body. Like I wanted to lock it in, you know, like I was feeling better. But, you know, I was only feeling better for like 5 months at this stage, and probably only totally better for maybe like 3 months. So, yeah, I think I wanted to go out there and really, it was just like another good thing I could do for myself. And after all the other good things I was doing for myself, and yeah, it was. I don't think it ever even crossed my mind to like not go just because I was feeling better.
Yeah, did you have a fear that this stuff would just resort back to your original state at any point?
Not because of the trip to Peru, but there was definitely something in the back of my mind that said like, you know, these symptoms could come back at some stage, but it wasn't a common thing that I was thinking. Like I just kept feeling like if I just keep doing this good stuff for myself, then why would the symptoms come back? So
Yeah, so now you have all this momentum, you
Mhm.
created a new habit,
Mhm.
and so now you're in Peru. What's going on there, man?
Yeah, well, that was a hell of a trip. Yeah, it was like a day and a half getting to the center, just traveling. I had to go, I think, via Amsterdam to Lima, the capital of Peru, and then from Lima to Iquitos, which is a good fact about this place. It's the biggest city in the world with no roads to it, so you can only fly or boat in there. And then from there, like a 30-minute, maybe an hour boat ride into the middle of the jungle, and
So
yeah.
it's like full on Indiana Jones style,
Yeah,
huh?
it felt like it, especially considering like I'd spent 4 years in an apartment, you know, like not
Yeah.
doing anything. So, what seems like a pretty epic adventure to most people, probably like even to me, seemed like even bigger still.
Yeah, so I mean, you were in your apartment for 4 years. You worked from home on your computer.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was your other lifestyle aspect of what probably, just being indoors, sitting on your butt for hours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, I think that's what definitely was a huge contributor to the me getting the condition in the first place. Sitting behind a computer for like 14 hours a day because, for whatever reason, it's socially acceptable to be a workaholic. You know that
Right.
people, in fact, not even socially acceptable. People see that as a positive thing. Like, oh, Scott's so driven. He's a young kid who's going to make it as a graphic designer, which was what I did in the past, and yeah, ultimately led to me getting very sick. But yeah, I got out to that point in Peru after just locking myself away for all of those years, and yeah, hell, even the journey was like a big scary experience to go through as
Just
well.
yourself, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like I had to in Lima, there was like a 12-hour stopover between me arriving there and then getting the flight basically the next morning to Iquitos, the city. And I thought maybe naively, oh, it's okay, I'll just sleep in the airport there. But it was a pretty small airport considering it was a capital city. There was nowhere to lie down really, and in a strange country that I didn't know. And I was thinking like, oh, if I fall asleep, people are just gonna maybe take my passport or money, or I didn't really know what was going on, so I couldn't sleep. Got about like halfway, well, maybe not even, maybe like 4 hours into this like 12-hour stay in the airport. I didn't sleep at all on the plane going over, probably because I was nervous. And yeah, at some point, like some Peruvian taxi driver came up to me. He's like, "Oh, my friend, you look very tired. I can find you like a hotel or something." And I felt like pretty. I felt like, oh, am I going to get in trouble here? If I don't know where this guy's going to take me, but I just went for it. I was desperate. I was exhausted,
Right.
and I'm sure he probably drove me like around Lima 3 times before getting to the
Yeah.
hotel. But he was a savior. Really, he got me a place to get some sleep before the flight the next day, and he's definitely freaked me out a few times. He's like, "Oh, do you like some company this evening, my friend? And do you like Peruvian ladies?" And
Yeah. Yeah.
so he thought I was pretty. I don't know. He foresaw the Hangry and Horny podcast coming along, and
Yeah, exactly. Because
I
he looked at you like, hey, gringo, you know, like this guy
yeah,
can be taken advantage of, which is a lot of fear for people that are traveling, and it's totally legitimate.
yeah,
But what you're touching upon is, I guess you somehow like trusted your intuition, and
mm,
we'll get into like maybe flow reality a little later,
yeah,
right? But like you just saw that this was an opportunity that presented itself, and
yeah.
you're like, hey, I'm just gonna go for it.
Totally. And there was definitely a few scares along the way. Like I mentioned, whenever he started suggest, I don't know. I basically, long story short, he was a savior and got me to like a nice little hotel. Probably cost me 10 times more than it needed to, but you know what? Like, I mean, he's living in maybe in a more poor part of the world. He could do with the money.
Yeah, they're
Uh,
just great salespeople, right? So he was trying to
yeah.
like upsell you on all kinds of different things, like ladies and some good
Yeah.
food and some like expensive hotel.
So he picked me up the next day and in the morning and everything, which was
Oh,
fine,
nice.
which was awesome. Got me back to the airport in time, and yeah, flew me out to Iquitos. And even at that time in the airport, like I'd met some of the people who were going to the retreat center as well. Like Lima Airport, people coming in, like it's small airport but busy, and most people are going in to like go to, Machu Picchu or all of the other more popular places in Peru. But yeah, like this a girl came over to me, Emily, who was going to the retreat, and was like, "Are you going to Spirit Quest?" And like that was the name of the sanctuary. I have no idea to this day how she had any
Yeah, you had it
idea.
written across your forehead,
I
right?
guess so, yeah.
Yeah. It's
So
like, how does that happen, right? Because I've had the similar experiences traveling to these remote places in the world where you do bump into people that
yeah,
are somehow doing the same thing you're doing. Is like, we don't like carry a cardboard sign saying like, this is what I'm doing on the trip. Like somehow we just like vibe off each other, and it just happens.
yeah, the connection just she just knew, and it was really cool. So yeah, she was somebody I made a really good connection with there, and her partner, and yeah, just the people that I met there, that was like as life changing as being in the Amazon or any of the plant medicine stuff. It was the first time in my life that I'd spent like, I think it was 3 weeks altogether by the time you include the travel, with people that wanted the best for themselves but each other as well. And for sure I'd had people around myself like that in my life, but like maybe one or two here or there, to something totally different to be in a group of like 20 people like that. And yeah, that was every bit as transformative as going to like one of the most beautiful places in the world, the Amazon jungle, or the plant medicine treatments. Just like that sense of community. So that's been a big drive for me, and everything I've been doing since to build that here
Hmm.
locally and online as well. Thankfully because of like podcasts and social media, we can like grow it online as well as in person. And it was thankfully, through online communities like the Wim Hof Method community, and I'm sure we'll get to that,
Yeah.
that we even connected
Yeah.
and set the ball rolling for everything that I'm doing now. But the first taste of that was definitely in Peru, and
Yeah, so that aspect of community you described was also very healing to see
yeah,
that other people in the world were also dealing with their own issues and looking for a solution,
mm,
and their path was to this center in Peru. So you guys take this medicine, like go through the process of how this works and like who's guiding you through all this.
yeah. So the medicine within it contains something called dimethyltryptamine, and I've sometimes struggled to find the right way to articulate this that won't turn some people off, but it contains like this dimethyltryptamine is the strongest hallucinogen known to man. It causes um, what some people would refer to as like hallucinations, but other people might describe as like a spiritual experience. For me, I'll give you my story, and people will interpret however they interpret it. I'm trying to let go of what other people think about it. All I can do is share my experience. But we got to this retreat center, so like 20 or so people. There was two main shamans, so There was an old Peruvian shaman called Don Robert, and he worked with his family, Don Eliana, who was his wife, and his son. So they were chiefly dealing with the plant medicine ayahuasca, which is native to the Peruvian Amazon. There was also the other shaman that I mentioned there, Don Howard, and he uses the plant medicine huachuma, which is sometimes known as San Pedro, a cactus medicine. And he'd been living in Peru for like 20 years at this point and using that medicine, which comes from up in the Andes originally, with the Chavin culture, and found its way into the Amazon as well with those people. But before that, he'd worked with the plant medicines native to North America, where he comes from. So like peyote and other, so indigenous people of the Americas, really. And they were the ones who were involved in administering the medicine. Just even from the most practical sense, how it kind of worked was like one evening on, one evening off, in terms of like when they would do the ceremonies with the plant medicines. And they would take us into this big circular hut called a maloca. It was a wooden hut, and it was kind of screened in, so there was mesh screen around the outside, so that like you weren't eaten alive by mosquitoes during the ceremony, but you heard all the noise of the jungle around you like throughout it. They would sit you around on mats around the outside of the around the inner edge of the maloca, and you would be called up one by one, and there was a little like altar, I guess, that the shaman sat in front of. You would look Don Robert, the Peruvian shaman, in the eyes, and he would get from that how much that to pour from you. He would look into your eyes and decide, okay, this guy needs half a cup or a full cup, or he would just kind of know.
Determine the dosage.
Totally. And you would set, they said that it was very important to set an intention for what you wanted to get out of the experience. So that's been huge for me, like, ever since. And I came to understand a lot more about that and how that was part of the Peruvian plant medicine culture and maybe wider culture. But just to even talk about that, my first experience that night, it was all about this idea of like cementing this good health that I'd built and the positive momentum, and making sure that whatever positive had happened within my body, whatever switch had gone on, that was locked in place and I was going to continue to feel better. So I drank the medicine, set that intention, went up there like super positive, and everyone, at least a couple of people had mentioned to me that it was a really positive thing for them to see me going up there smiling and like, being positive, and then went and lay down on my mat, not knowing what to expect at all, because probably important to say at this point, like, I had zero any experience with anything hallucinogenic or any psychedelics or anything like that. This was 2 feet in at the deep end with the strongest hallucinogen known to man.
Mm-hmm.
So I went laid back down on my mat, zero idea what to expect. And truthfully, I don't think there's anything I could even say now that would probably do any justice to what that experience is like for someone else who'd never experienced it. But yeah, whenever people say hallucinations or a spiritual experience, it feels like something's coming to you, and whether it's like a vision or a knowing or an understanding, things started happening. And interestingly, for me, absolutely nothing to do with about my literal physical pain. It has nothing to do with like joint inflammation or the physical healing in my body. I was taken back to like different relationships that I'd had with women in the past. So I don't even mean like in a romantic way, even though that was part of it, but like women as friends and like in a place of authority, and maybe how I had bad relationships with women in the past. And I went to an all boys school whenever I was like 12 or 11 or 12. And it's just like so unhealthy, like why would they, I still don't understand,
separate you.
So
boys and girls.
Gave me like I just didn't have a very good relationship with females, I suppose. And this first plant medicine journey, all this stuff was coming up for me, and like how like I had different relationships with different women in the past, relating in different ways, and how that was affecting my day to day, actions and how I would relate to women. And interestingly, they call ayahuasca it's like a female plant energy, and in their belief in Peru at least anyway. And I figured that out in hindsight, that maybe that this was some work that I needed to do to heal my relationship with women before this, what they call like female plant energy, could actually do any more to help me. So yeah, that was like completely took me left field, which is really cool, because what a great first experience, because it allowed me to see something within myself that I didn't know consciously was going on. So it was like on so many levels really powerful, because it showed me the strength of the medicine, that it could reveal something to me that I didn't know consciously myself. And whether that's just because it like hits some part of the subconscious, or whether that's some kind of message from outside or external, or whether that's all even the same thing, I suppose it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so I mean, this goes back to like the whole, five richest family and the conspiracy theories of all these different like industries.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that may be true, may not be true. The same with the plant medicines. Like, you don't know where this message is coming from, but the fact of the matter is you're receiving this message, and it like changed your life.
Yeah.
It actually gave you something to put the rubber to the road. So whether we are living in some kind of conspiracy matrix, or the plant medicine, we don't know where that message came from. It gave you something that you can apply to what you do know in this life that you're living right now.
Totally. I think Joe Rogan mentioned something like that one time. It's like whether you have a hallucination where some magical dragon comes and tells you some truth that you can apply to your life, or whether a literal dragon appeared and told you something that you can apply to your life. What's the difference if you're applying something good to your life? So that was the case for me. I don't really care what that message, like where it's coming from, but that and the subsequent plant medicine treatments that I went through, and the other things that were kind of revealed to me, it feels like that's like the best word to use. It was like, the other knowledge that I was given and understandings that I was given, it doesn't matter where it came from, but I'm doing my damned hardest to make that a reality in the world. And yeah, the continuing, so there was 5 ayahuasca ceremonies altogether, and there was various lessons in like courage and bravery, and then the final 2 in particular, like I felt was just almost like breaking me down a little bit. Like I was, not that I ever had a really bad experience, but I was just really tired and like drained and spent so much energy already, and it kind of really set me up very well for the next medicine treatment, which was something that I mentioned before, called Huachuma. And instead of taking this medicine and just going sitting around the edge of the maloca on the mats, they would give you this medicine in the morning, and you would go out on an adventure into nature, into the jungle. So that was really cool.
Yeah, and you're at a fatigue state. So, this is like a test to see what you're like truly made out of, and, using somewhat of your will to push through and persevere. So you get given this Wachuma, and they're like, go on an adventure.
Yeah.
What happened then?
So it actually felt really uplifting, to be honest. Like, I think I was just kind of glad that the whole ayahuasca process was done. And it was also kind of sad as well, because there was a bunch of people who were there at the retreat center just for the ayahuasca treatment. So they'd left at the end of that. And there was only maybe like, I don't know, 2/3 or a half of the group that remained for the Huachuma treatment. And then there's even a couple of people who came just for the Huachuma and weren't there for ayahuasca. So there was definitely a certain sadness, because like these people that I just like bonded with massively through going through those plant medicine treatments, and then we'd all sit around the next morning and talk about what we'd experienced. You get massively bonded with those people, and then even within those 10 days. And again, this was another lesson for me that I would come to use later in like, how bonding it is to go through a stress together and, come through the other side. But yeah, so there was a sadness as some of the people were leaving, but it also kind of was like there's a freshness to it as well. You know, there's a couple of new people arrived, and things really shifted, and it was a chance to go on this adventure with a different plant medicine. And I think like that first plant medicine treatment with Wachuma was one of the best days of my life, to be honest. It was so positive, and uh, we went and visited one of the tribes, and yeah, there was a lot of visiting different tribes in the jungle whenever we were treated with Wachuma, and the warmth and love from the tribes and playing with the children, you know, during the whole experience. On one of the other Wachuma treatments, we got to go and swim in this, you know, a little lake that they had that was really special to them and revered. And yeah, it was just, if the ayahuasca last couple of treatments in particular broke me down, like this really lifted me up. And it was on the morning of the first Wachuma treatment, like it just kind of came to me even before I'd taken the medicine, that the biggest and most important thing I took from that whole time was that what had happened with my health felt like nothing short of a miracle. Like, you know, I was told I was never going to get better, and then here I am, better, you know, and not suffering any symptoms, and lost all of this weight. That there was a responsibility upon me with that I just couldn't let that end with myself. And there was one of the guys there who was a health coach with the Czech Academy, Stian, from Norway, and yeah, I was just really inspired by him and what he was doing, and I felt like I've got this amazing story that, you know, in transformation with my own health. I'm going to go back home and train at the same place that he did, and go
The Paul Chek Institute.
Yeah, exactly, at the European Czech Academy, and go back and help people. So yeah, it was amazing, and that came to me before the first Wachuma treatment on that morning. I still remember sitting around talking to Stian and Ryan there, and it's just coming to me. And then going up to the altar, and then with this medicine in particular, Don Howard said that it was really important in particular to remember this idea of reciprocity. So like to ask for something, but to be willing to offer something back. And I still remember setting this intention of wanting to go back and help, you know, people in the world, and, you know, people who may be in the same sort of position that I was, or even not necessarily as bad, but, you know, help people who were unwell, but also offer the betterment to people who were already healthy. And in exchange for that, you know, like I was willing to offer up sacrifice of the inevitable hard times of like starting a new business and having to deal with like the financial strains of that, and like the stresses and the late nights of business. Like I foresaw all of this already, and so I offered up my commitment in the face of that, and asked for the ability to be able to have an impact in the world and help other people. And the shaman Don Howard said to me, you know, we went through a little ceremony just before drinking the medicine, and he just quietly said to me, like, it's a noble path you want to take, brother. And you know, he could have said something similar to everyone for all I knew, but in that moment it felt like he knew exactly what I was, you know, processing. He looked me dead in the eyes with these like crystal clear blue eyes that I've only ever seen, you know, I've only ever experienced someone looking at me in that way from him, and the first time I met Wim Hof as well, of all people. So he looked me in the eyes and told me that it was a noble path that I wanted to take, and it felt like there was some understanding of like that I got that it was going to be hard, but I was going to do it anyway. And
and somehow magically this guy can read you.
It felt like it, yeah. And maybe that's something that only I'll ever truly know that feeling of, but all I can do is express that it felt exactly like that in the moment. And yeah, those remaining ceremonies were just really built me up to a point where I came back and wanted to study, and really committed to going to study at the Czech Academy, like I'd mentioned. And that was the first step onto the whole Causeway Living journey, whether I knew it or not at that time.
Right. So, I mean, before that, did you have any kind of background in human health or physiology, anatomy?
No, nothing at this stage. So it was quite daunting, to be honest. And especially whenever I went there to start studying, like everyone else was either like a personal trainer, or like I was probably the only person there who had no background in this kind of work. So I remember phoning back home and, saying that I found it really difficult, and like, there's a lot about anatomy that I didn't understand at that time. And yeah, it was a real challenge, to be honest, because it was
You're
all
learning a
so
new
new.
language, essentially.
Basically, yeah, and I felt a bit out of my depth, but I stuck to it and I got the qualification, and yeah, that was the interesting part. I was given a piece of paper saying you're a health coach now, but didn't really know what to do with it, if I'm being honest. So yeah, it was another like year that had passed, where I had this piece of paper saying you're a health coach, and not really sure what to do with that, and
Rem-
probably needed that time to just like adjust to having a healthy body again, and
right,
like
right.
integrate some of the lessons that had come through the plant medicine
See, you're already
experience.
reading my mind, right? So,
There you go.
yeah, because I was gonna ask you, like, what were you doing in that year since the plant medicine journey, and so you essentially answered it.
Pretty much. I mean, there is a little bit more to it. Like within a couple of weeks of getting home from Peru, I met a really amazing woman who I ended up in a relationship with for over 3 years.
Just like
And
that.
just like that, yeah, I came home, met Carolina, and yeah, just like the exact right person at the right time for me in that moment, and kind of everything that I'd ever dreamt of and wanted, like the most beautiful woman, and she was really sweet and kind, and really understanding of my journey, and yeah, we had like an awesome time. Like she'd just moved to Ireland as well, and yeah, I guess we both came from, we probably became quite like overly like codependent, I guess, because she was in a new country, had no connections here. As I'd mentioned before, I was like, I didn't have many connections here because I'd isolated myself, and um yeah, but in that time and place, it was great. It served a purpose. I learned a lot from that, and yeah, I kind of adjusted to, maybe went through a lot of healing work in my relationships with women, through that experience. And yeah, just kind of got used to a normal life, was continuing on my graphic design work, not making a living just about, but not like um, crazy successful. And I was still, I was still putting effort into that, but I was also continuing education for myself in like alternative health practices. So, I'd done like different fasts and other things that I'd found out about online, because, I'd gone and done the Czech qualification, but um, I was still really interested in other alternative health practices because they'd brought so much to my life. So the after about a year of like trying different things just for my own benefit, that's when I came across the Wim Hof method.
You're reading
And
my mind again.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that was incredible. And the thing that spoke to me about that, after watching the Vice documentary about Wim and listening to the Joe Rogan podcast again with Wim Hof the first time he was on there.
So Wim Hof, the Iceman, that's broken like over 20 Guinness Book World Records.
Yeah, that's important to explain who he is. So yeah, he's just the Iceman. He's got over 20 world records related to different physical challenges. So running a marathon in the Arctic Circle barefoot, or running a marathon in the desert without water. All of these crazy feats that he could put his body through, through controlling the nervous system, and all through breath work and the cold and the right mindset. So this was fascinating to me, but the most fascinating thing about Wim and his work and all that he had achieved was the fact that his breathwork practice was able to reduce inflammation in the body. And the Radboud study that offered credibility, a peer-reviewed scientific study that they did on Wim at first on his own, and then eventually with Wim and a bunch of people that he trained in the method, that they injected with an endotoxin, so the inflammatory proteins from E. coli. And they had this like control group of people who'd been injected with the endotoxin, and 100% reliably, you know, it's going to put high inflammation in the body, people throwing up, or worse again, sweating. And of course, you know, in the control group, you know, it was 100% reliable. They're all throwing up and feeling awful. And in the Wim Hof group, they're all huffing and puffing and feeling awesome. So,
And no sign of flu-like symptoms.
yeah, exactly. So that really jumped out to me as like something, if I'm being honest, initially came to me like with it was like a prevention mindset. So I sort of felt like, you know, if my symptoms ever come back again, you know, this is still only what, like a year and a half since starting the whole juice fast thing. I thought that if my symptoms ever come back, this can just be another good tool that I can use to reduce inflammation, and so I don't have to go back on those pharmaceutical drugs again. And yeah, I went into it with that mindset, but it very quickly changed from prevention to optimization whenever I noticed my cardiovascular fitness greatly improved, my mental well-being improved. Like, even in that year after I came back from Peru, like, even though my mental well-being had greatly improved through that, like, it was still like really a roller coaster for me. I was still like in a huge transitional phase, and knowing that I wanted to do something good in the world but not really knowing how to do it. And like, I was, you know, still having a lot of struggles at this stage. So that really helped me improve my mental well-being and how I dealt with stress better. And then the other thing that I found from the Wim Hof Method was like the first time that I'd come across the same sense of community that I found in Peru since coming home. So
Yeah, tribe of people. So finding the others and yeah, people that are on a similar path as you.
exactly. And yeah, like I said, it was the first time that I was able to find like a group of people like that. Initially just online, and yeah, the first time I'd made that kind of happen in person was in San Diego, or like La Costa near San Diego.
Yeah, in Carlsbad.
Carlsbad, that's right.
Yeah, northern San Diego, North County.
Yeah, so I was going out to, at this stage, like I mentioned, you know, I'd had the health coaching qualification, didn't know what to do with it, was still doing graphic design work, and my brother gave me the opportunity to come work with him and do like travel around to different places, but just still working on my laptop with him. And that trip was going to go via San Diego, or, you know, California, and then we're going to go to China and then Thailand. And I remember at that time we'd got connected online through a mutual friend,
David Gilmore. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. I posted something like a week after starting the 10-week online Wim Hof Method course. I posted up the Vice documentary and said, you know, for accountability, I've been doing this for a week, I want to see it out all the way through. And I'm just saying that publicly so that, you know, I'm holding myself accountable to stick to it. And he saw this and then made the connection mentally to you, you know, somebody that he'd met through the London Rail Academy. And yeah, you were renowned within that group of people for being the Wim Hof guy, right? Like, having well practiced it and getting to know that inside and out. So so yeah, David made the connection, put us in touch, and I think I'd sent like a message before, like at some point asking a question about the online course, but it wasn't until like I was coming to the end of the 10 weeks, I noticed that you posted a picture at San Diego Cryotherapy Center.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, that's the place that I'm going, you know?
Oh, wow.
So I reached out and was like, you know, let's grab lunch whenever we get there, because I'd been in touch, and yeah, we'd like, you know, spoken a little bit, but nothing major. And yeah, we got together for lunch at Omni La Costa, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. Omni.
Yeah,
it's pretty wild. Yeah, it was pretty trippy because, you know, because of the Wim Hof community, people were reaching out to me, including you.
Yeah.
And it's been like such a huge impactful thing in my life to be part of a tribe of people that were, you know, on a similar path, that wanted to optimize our lives. And you know, the message that Wim was, you know, teaching was just like health, happiness, and what, like, love, or
right.
You know. So essentially there were other people that were having these similar stories where they were getting better from their conditions that were, you know, some sort of symptom of illness. and they were having all these profound effects, including myself. And this also helped me discover something deeper in myself that, we've lost touch because of the modernization, as we talked about earlier in our conversation here. And so when we finally met, we just had that sort of instant connection. And then as we started to get to know each other more, and you were sharing me your story of, how you've healed and your journey. And so I was just like, man, this guy is awesome. We got to stay in touch for sure. And, we had our sort of customary Guinness floats, which was pretty cool because you're from Ireland and I had spent time in Dublin before, and I toured the Guinness factory and had the best Guinness of my life, and nothing other Guinnesses ever since. Everywhere else has been kind of pale in comparison from the stores.
Yeah.
So to have an actual like a root beer float or a Coke float with ice cream, we had it with a Guinness.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing, So ever since that, we've been in touch, and to see your growth, as you were saying, with your shaman, almost foreseeing your journey and reciprocity and what you've learned, and giving this back out to the world in form of an altruistic company in which you founded, through a group that I co-founded called Tribe Shift. And through that, you came up with Causeway Living. Swing.
Represent.
So go into that story. What was it? What happened during our meeting? And then from there.
Yeah, so we got together for lunch and just had this epic conversation that we basically, I don't know, maybe 4 hours passed and it was almost dinner time, right?
Right.
And we just went into kind of everything that we've talked about until
just
this
flow
stage.
reality, right? Another
100%.
dimension.
Feels like it. And then you shared your story with where you were at and all everything that you've been through, which is fascinating as well. And just so many similarities about our journeys and paths, and again that feeling of someone who just wants to do better for themselves but also wants the best for everyone else. And yeah, it's just this knowing that I've found tribe. And especially whenever you were saying to me at that time that you were in the process at this stage of setting up Tribe Shift, which is an amazing online collective of people who were doing the same sort of things. So I thought this was awesome.
Yeah, and this was based on the principles of a Maori chief that I also met through London Real Academy. It was an actual chief of a tribe in New Zealand, and his name is Kepa Micah, co-founded with another gentleman, and we that's a whole nother story. But anyways, we had the tribal principles of just sharing, being in community, of healing and love, kind of the same things that Wim Hof was espousing, that was gonna help heal the planet and have all of us humans come together and protect this precious place that we live in. So we met, we connected.
And then not that long afterwards you had Tribe Shift set up, and it was this great online forum of amazing people who were out there doing cool things, and where I met Casper, who we've already mentioned a few times, and he's basically the head of the Wim Hof Academy in terms of teaching. And it was yourself and Casper and some of the other guys that I'd met through that really encouraged and inspired me to put my story online. So everything that we've talked about, put up the health coaching qualification I had through the Czech Academy, and even if I didn't really know where it was going, just to put it up and out there, and just to get the story out there and just do something, take action, rather than looking at this piece of paper that I had and going, oh, I don't know, so it was just taking an action.
And what was that process like for you? Because everybody's always being told to take action. Everybody knows to take action, but most people don't.
Yeah.
And you, as I know you, had been pretty reclusive and kind of naturally introverted until you're in the right community and the right sort of ambiance, and then like the real Scott Riley comes out. So what was it? How did you go into that process of taking action?
Yeah, so I'd mentioned being guided, by friends like yourself to do something, and I had the background in graphic design, so that was very fortunate that I could start a process of just putting a website together and like putting my story out there and putting my qualification up. And thankfully, with the online group, I was able to bounce names back and forward and like ideas, and I was getting this like really good like free think tank basically, to bounce ideas off, and people who were already like well qualified, I guess, for lack of a better term, to who had good opinions to give through their own experience, or who were already doing very well within this kind of industry. And had a lot of good guidance to initially just start speaking my truth, essentially. Like, that's, I guess, if anything, if there's any way to like narrow it down, is just to like just start telling people what happened and speaking up, because as you said, I'm definitely a really shy and introverted person naturally. It's very difficult for me even at the moment, like to speak up at times, but all the best things in my life have happened whenever I have the bravery to speak up and speak my truth. And yeah, if you're going to boil it down to anything in terms of taking action, it was like speak my truth openly and publicly. And that in that moment just meant putting my story up online and putting my qualification up line, and just putting it out there as like offering health coaching initially. Then in the months that passed, I would just be documenting my journey and some of the like other health practices that I was investigating. So, whether it was like Wim Hof Method, or whether it was like maybe some of the fasts that I was doing, or barefoot running. There was all these different things that I was going through on my journey while still offering health coaching. And in that time, I was going through the process of becoming a certified Wim Hof Method instructor as well, which I saw as like the longer term solution to offer people some of the same health benefits that I'd gained through through means that aren't as practical. So everyone can breathe. Everyone can get into a cold shower, more or less,
Move.
Can move, yeah. Not everyone can go 2 months without eating and fly to Peru. So I don't want to be, I'm not that anyone should, Whereas everyone can benefit from breathing a bit better, doing some movement, getting into the elements that were made to deal with naturally. And
Yeah, a little bit of stretching, yoga.
yeah.
Use their body essentially as the first step.
Totally, and that really integrated well with all that I'd learned in the Czech Academy and these 6 pillars of health. So hydration, nutrition, sleeping, breathing, moving, and thinking. It all really tied in well with the Wim Hof stuff. So yeah, thanks to encouragement from yourself and others, that I put up my story online, put up my qualification, I pushed to become a certified Wim Hof Method instructor. And it was really from there and becoming a Wim Hof Method instructor that it was like the first steps to creating that sense of community at home with my Dash and Splash group that you've been involved with and attended a few times. And
yeah, so you created this huge community of people in your local town of Bangor, and just watching you do like one of the first ones. And over like weeks, I mean, it's been how many months now since you started?
I think we're on week 47, so we're getting close to 1 full year.
1 full year, right?
Almost.
And so you basically, started as you, and how many people showed up at the first one?
So the first one, there was like 15 people or something, which was crazy,
Yeah.
I don't think all of them swam, like maybe like 10 or so, but there was some people who came just for the run and maybe to scope it out and see what happened. And I remember being so nervous and like wondering how many people would turn up. but there was quite a lot, for like the first week. And I guess maybe I'd underestimated how many people were just following what I was doing, just from like putting out the blogs and offering the health coaching stuff. And yeah, there was like 15 people that first week, but the most we've ever had on one occasion was this special Dash and Splash event that we did on the summer solstice. And there was like 50 people on the beach, this like quite small beach in my hometown, and we've got some cool drone footage of it that I haven't even put out yet.
Oh,
But
really? That's cool.
yeah,
Nice.
it looks amazing.
Yeah, so it's definitely caught like media attention, and people from different parts of the world are like showing up to these events now, and including as myself and our buddy Nima over there sitting in the studio audience. What's up, Nima? And so it's really neat to see how much this grown. In fact, you actually like inspired me to start a community called Magic Flow Bus, where people get together of like minds who want to create a change in their life and actually actualize their potential, not just sit around and think about it and think what if, but here are a bunch of people that are meeting up just because it's fun to meet up in the first place, and you're doing something like go into nature and connect with the cold and connect to breathing and connect to each other. And so this thing has grown, and it's really neat to see you having sort of notoriety in Ireland now in different parts and hosting different Wim Hof events.
Yeah, it's crazy. I just got nominated for a national award for community engagement, and to think like only 4 years ago I was like way back to that part of the story where I was overweight and so sick, and now on a short list of people who maybe going to be recognized nationally for bringing people together. And like I said, like in Peru, like that was the big thing, to come back and build this sense of community, and now it's really happening. So yeah, that Dash and Splash event is something really special because of the people that come to it. Like you said, it's just people who want to take action, people who are willing to get out of bed on a Sunday morning and go for a 30-minute jog and run in the pretty freezing cold Irish Sea all the way through winter as well. So
yeah, so they're basically getting uncomfortable with being comfortable, and so basically turning it around, because a lot of people are comfortable with being uncomfortable. So so you provided a platform for people to really start to tap into their own flow and their own like flow reality and their own I guess sense of themselves, and the ability to feel alive, and feel a connection. So as we wrap up, like what are some things you can sort of advise people on, looking back at your sort of 4 years ago old self? Like what changes have you seen in yourself, and what could you suggest to people who are at that place where you were 4 years ago?
I feel like that place I was at 4 years ago, I was still like hiding from the world, and I'm still in the process of like fully expressing myself, and it's still a journey. But the one piece of advice, if you can really boil it down to one thing, is what we touched on earlier, like just speak your truth, like be your most authentic self. And that sounds so cheesy, just be yourself.
Yeah, just be real.
But it's it's a cliche for a reason. The more authentic you can be and the more open and honest you can be, things start getting better. And ever since I had that push from yourself and others to go out and speak my truth online and just start doing the stuff that I love doing, like going out for a run and jumping in the sea. Like it's fun, like other people see that and like I want to do that as well. And yeah,
what do you think they see?
What do they see? I honestly believe that people see that there's like fun and authenticity in it, and it's liberating. It's real. In a world that's basically full of shit most of the time, this is something that's real. You go out into nature, you really get to connect with other people in a way that the cold and the elements like strip away so many layers. So like people aren't just small talking, they're talking about real things there. And going through a stress together, you know, which is, like I said, so bonding. And yeah, I think people see that connection through community, through nature, and then they get to connect to themselves in a way that they might never have done before in that stressful environment. And yeah, I think that's a really positive thing. So go out there and be your most authentic self, which I totally appreciate is easier said than done. Get active outdoors with other people, you know, like that's gonna strip away some layers, and you're gonna find people who are, yeah, like really connecting to some of the same things that we've just talked about there, you know, like in a really deep way. And yeah, find the others.
Right. I mean, it started like sometimes just connecting with people online is as weird as it sounds, but it's just becoming more and more of a norm. Except that, you know, in the case of, you know, a community that we had mentioned earlier, it was that too many people were stuck online and not actually, you know, taking action, but just talking about ideas. So as much as a positive thing is to be on Facebook or any of these social media outlets and like connect to a community, there comes a point where like you got to stop, like, you know, electronically jerking each other off and choking each other's chain, and actually go out in the world and, like, you know, face and with courage and bravery, and, you know, taking the most tiniest step. I always tell people is like a micro step towards that end goal. Or I don't even like to use goals. It's more like a vision, like take that one step. So I've seen you do it over and over again, and as well as our other friends, there's this sense of like dying daily every day, which is, you know, like an old part of your limiting self or fear-based self starts to die, you know, because you took that one first step in that direction or where you want to go in life. So you find a similar type of mentality for yourself.
Yeah, 100%. One thing that I heard Professor Jordan Peterson, this Canadian clinical psychologist, say was like, you know, if you don't know where to start, maybe you're not aiming low enough. You know, like take one tiny step, and it might just be the thing that sets your momentum in the right direction. And we talked a lot about that, how, you know, if you're not going forward, you're going backwards. There's momentum traveling one way or another, you know. That law of entropy, things left to themselves through the passage of time will fall apart. So you better like take some steps in the right direction. And yeah, any small positive step is a great start. Small steps to giant living is my company's motto. So
Yep.
yeah, anything small you can do for yourself can lead on to some bigger leaps, you know, further down the line. And not to say that necessarily everyone gets to the point of climbing to the top of a snowy mountain basically in their underpants, but not that everyone has to either. And, you know, just get the momentum rolling in the right way. And yeah, one small action might just be the place to start.
What other tools, as we wrap up again, like that you recommend for people to help them transform their lives or to get out of the rut or where they feel stuck?
So talking about small steps, like I've got a 6-week online course that I'm in the middle of like revamping a little bit, but called 6 Week Shift. And it looks at building positive habits in those 6 pillars of health that are talked about in the Czech Academy a lot. And I've also mentioned the 2 that see a most immediate impact in my experience, if you're not already looking after these, are hydration and sleep. And they're 2 like a lot more simple than some of the other ones. So sometimes it's hard to get motivation to go out for a run or to the gym, especially if you're already very unfit. But it doesn't take that much to like have a bottle of water sitting near you all the time, or being showing enough dedication to self-improvement to like put the phone down maybe like an hour earlier each night and go to bed at a more reasonable time. If people aren't drinking water or going to sleep at a decent hour, if they start doing those 2 things, which isn't a big ask, that can see a profound shift in people. And I've definitely noticed that in people doing my 6-week course. Like they get 3 days in, they're like, I feel like an entirely new person, this is the best course ever. And it's just because they're sleeping and drinking water. You know, the rest of the stuff will like come good in time, but those are the two of the most immediate things. beyond that, looking into things like the Wim Hof Method. There is a 10-week online course for local people. I do workshops all over the country. Been in Galway recently. I'm going back down to Dublin soon. I was in Oma the past weekend. I do workshops in the Mourne Mountains a couple of times each month, and in Belfast every month, so local folks can come and check that out, learn a little bit more about breath work and entering the cold as a means of self-development and working on your mindset through that. So it's another really positive thing to do. But the one thing that you could do to help with all of that entirely is just get around the sort of people who are already integrating it in their lives, like that sense of community. Connect with other people who are doing this stuff already, and it's a hell of a lot easier, and you get that motivation and encouragement to do it too. So find the others really, and whether that's like online or whether you've got a local community you can tap into, like that's definitely got to be the first best thing that anyone can do for themselves.
That's cool. And the final thing I would add is that sometimes you do find these communities and they serve their purpose for the initial like phase as you're starting to go on to this trek of learning. And then sometimes people mature or graduate, or sometimes you're around people that you don't really like align with or resonate because of differences. We're all human, so and there's certain things that you may have like standards for that just doesn't work for you. And it's not something that like for example, earlier I mentioned a person that shall not be named, but it's just an example of sometimes you go through life and you hit these like little ruts or blockages or issues with other humans. And it's not like, for example, I don't have like anything against them, but to be able to value yourself and have the confidence to let's say be able to move forth, even if it's just yourself sometimes, so there's like benefits of being in a tribe, which we've formed, but at the same time it is you in the world, and you're the one that's gonna have to sort of make things happen, take action, or in some ways like have it come through you. But like we were talking about earlier with like Nima, was like some people who were writing a book per se, like Casper. He set a discipline commitment every day just to show up and make that like micro step. And then 30 days later he had a book, right? So you'd be surprised like what happens when you take the initiative with your own self. And as you did, Scott, you 4 years ago were at that breaking point and you took that initiative because you're like, I don't want to go to the end of my life and ask like, what if? And like, look where that journey is taking you, man. It's so impressive. And your human side that I really appreciate about you is that you're like, hey, I'm still human. I'm still having a hard time like doing these things. I still feel insecure like the moment before doing it. And same with me, man. Like I'm totally insecure, but I also know what it's like on the other end. And because we've done this so many times, we had this support group, and we were able to remove people that aren't as supportive, because maybe they're just going through their own demons, right? So I just recommend to people like, it's okay to like say no to people, and it's okay to say no to a cult. If you don't feel right with an individual or an organization, it's okay to step out on your own. And so like that's a lot of the things that we're teaching people, is to become empowered. So on another final note, where can people find you, Scott Riley?
Everything is on social media under Causeway Living. So everything, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all Causeway Living, and causewayliving.com is the website.
How do you spell Causeway Living?
CAUSEWAY living.com.
Okay.
And people can find me there and learn about all the fun stuff that we talked about today.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on Hangry and Horny, Scott Riley.
Thanks again, bro.
All right, brother. Love you, man.
Love you, man.